A single ember glows in the dark. 20 bodies lie around it, close enough to touch. Breath rises and falls in the cold. Somewhere in that circle, two people move quietly toward each other. No walls separate them from the rest. No door. No corner to disappear into. Just firelight and 40 ears that never fully sleep. We assume privacy is a human right older than memory. It is not. It is an invention recent, fragile, and stranger than it looks. Most people imagine the ancient world as empty. A single family, alone under the stars, doing whatever they wished, whenever they wished, unseen. That image is wrong. For more than 95% of human existence, people did not live alone. They lived in bands of 20, 30, sometimes 80, sleeping inside a radius a modern person could cross in 4 steps. Anthropologists studying surviving hunter-gatherer societies, from the Hadza of Tanzania to the Juhoansi of the Kalahari, find the same pattern again and again: shared shelters, shared fires, shared sightlines. Solitude was not the default condition of early human life. It was a resource scarce, valuable, fought over without ever being named. If that's true, what happened to intimacy? Did it simply happen in the open, indifferent, in front of everyone? The answer is stranger than either extreme. Chimpanzees mate in the open. A female in estrus announces it with her body vivid, unmistakable, visible to every male nearby. Bonobos go further still, using sex publicly, almost as language, to diffuse tension and cement alliance. Humans diverged. Across nearly every documented culture, foraging societies included, with no walls and no doors, copulation is deliberately concealed, timed for darkness, moved to the edges of camp. Wrapped in discretion, even where discretion has no architecture to hide behind. This is not a coincidence. It is a signal that somewhere in our evolutionary past, sex became linked to social risk because in a small group of individuals who gossip, judge, and remember, visibility is never just visibility. It is information, and information is dangerous. There's a biological clue buried in this too. Human ovulation is concealed, no swelling, no unmistakable signal, unlike most mammals. Researchers still debate exactly why. Some link it to longer-term bonding between partners who could never be certain when conception was possible. Others link it to reduced conflict between rivals. Whatever the mechanism, the direction is consistent. Our species evolved toward concealment, not away from it biologically, long before culturally. It's worth sitting with how unusual this makes us. Among the great apes, humans are the outlier, the species that paired sociality this intense with concealment this deliberate. Living in tight, interdependent groups usually predicts less privacy, not more, because there's simply nowhere to put it. And yet somewhere in the deep past, our lineage found a way to want both, the safety of the group and a pocket of darkness carved out from inside it. A hunter-gatherer band survives on cooperation. Every member depends on every other, for food, for defense, for children who take over a decade to become self-sufficient. In a world like that, jealousy is not a minor friction. It's an existential threat. A single visible transgression witnessed by the wrong person could unravel alliances that took years to build, and there was no escaping the fallout. You could not move to another neighborhood. The band was the world. So groups developed quiet rules, unwritten, rarely spoken aloud. Move to the tree line after dark. Wait until the fire burns low and others feign sleep. Choose the hollow beneath the rock overhang no one else uses at night. These weren't laws handed down by a leader. They were behaviors worn smooth by repetition. The way trails form across a field and the groups that developed them functioned, the groups that didn't, fractured. Privacy, in other words, was never a luxury early humans wished for. It was social engineering their survival depended on. This is the detail that unsettles people most. Early humans achieved privacy not through architecture, but through discipline. Ethnographers living among the Juhoansi of the Kalahari, sharing a single hut among extended families, have documented something striking. When a couple withdraws for intimacy, often to the camp's edge, after dark, others do not react. Conversations continue. Children are hushed away from curiosity, not toward it. The next morning, no one comments. This has been called social privacy concealment that lives not in walls, but in the collective agreement of a group to grant each other a fiction of solitude. The same pattern turns up an ocean away. Among the Aceh of the Paraguayan rainforest, where dense canopy makes physical separation both dangerous and impractical, researchers describe a nearly identical rhythm. Couples move to the margins of shared space, and the group, by unspoken agreement, does not follow with its attention. And in the Arctic, families sharing a single igloo through months of polar darkness developed the same solution again, independently intimacy occurring on a shared sleeping platform, under blankets, with relatives present and, by long custom, deliberately inattentive. 3 continents, 3 environments with almost nothing in common. The same invention, arrived at separately, every time, which raises an uncomfortable question about what privacy actually is. Is it the absence of an audience? Or is it the audience's agreement to pretend they aren't there? Something shifted around 10,000 years ago, when humans began building houses instead of moving with the seasons. A new possibility entered the species' repertoire: the door, the room that could be closed. But the archaeological record complicates the tidy version of this story. At Çatalhöyük, a densely packed settlement in what is now Turkey, thousands of people lived 9,000 years ago in single-room mud brick houses, entered not through doors but through holes in the roof. No streets, no hallways. A family's entire life cooking, working, sleeping, even burying their dead beneath the floor happened in one enclosed space. It was, in its way, more private than the mobile camps before it, sealed from neighbors, from strangers, from the wider settlement. But it solved privacy from the outside long before it solved privacy on the inside, between the people who shared that single room. The pattern holds for thousands of years afterward. In much of medieval Europe, even prosperous households used a single, multi-purpose great chamber for sleeping, working, and receiving guests, sometimes shared with servants, sometimes with travelers passing through. Beds were frequently shared, not just by couples, but by siblings, parents, and children. Strangers at a roadside inn. Within that world, a married couple's intimacy did not usually happen behind a locked door in an empty room. It happened inside heavy curtains drawn around the bed frame itself, a small, tent-like pocket of concealment inside a room that might hold children or servants, quietly asleep or quietly pretending to be. The curtain, not the door, was Europe's primary technology of privacy for centuries. It is, structurally, the same solution the Juhuansi built around an open fire, tens of thousands of years earlier, on another continent entirely. Privacy, when it finally arrived in its modern architectural form, did not arrive for everyone at once. Historians tracing the emergence of the corridor, a hallway allowing movement between rooms without walking directly through them, call it one of the most significant, least celebrated inventions in the history of privacy. Before it became common, moving through a large house often meant passing directly through whatever room lay in between, regardless of who occupied it. The corridor made rooms genuinely separate, but for a long stretch of history it was available almost exclusively to the wealthy, whose homes were large enough to afford the extra space it required. For servants and laborers for most of the population, the older pattern persisted for generations after the wealthy had already moved on. Shared beds, multi-use rooms, movement through occupied space, because there was no other way to move at all. Privacy became one of the first purchasable human experiences. Not a condition available to those who wanted it most, but to those who could afford the walls required to make concealment structurally possible. That inheritance is still built into the floor plan of nearly every home standing today. Underneath all of this architecture sits a harder, more evolutionary question. What was concealment actually protecting? Evolutionary psychologists studying jealousy across cultures find it strikingly consistent at its core, an alarm system tuned to threats against a bond that, for most of human history, carried enormous survival stakes. In a small band, visible infidelity wasn't a private betrayal. It was public information, instantly available to a community whose food sharing and mutual defense depended on stable alliances. Living without physical privacy meant children in these communities were exposed to far more of adult, intimate life than a modern parent, raised behind a closed bedroom door, would typically consider comfortable. Researchers studying child development across cultures have approached this carefully, noting that in societies with strong norms of social privacy, children appear to absorb the same discretion adults practice, learning early which sounds are not to be acknowledged, which questions are not asked at breakfast,